to take a second to introduce Joni, who has a long experience in accounts payable and everything related to payments at JetBlue. And we've been working together for quite some time. Apex and JetBlue have had a great partnership. Why don't you tell us a little bit about JetBlue, Joni?
Great, thanks, Danny. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. I have been with JetBlue for just coming up on 20 years. So I've been here almost since the very beginning. In the last 10 years, I've been in finance. The slide you're seeing right now is drastically changed over the last few months. Unfortunately, we should be at about 1,100 daily flights. We are at about 70 daily flights right now. That number of crew members is dropping with all of the COVID issues going on. We are still holding around 100 destinations, limited service in a lot of those right now. We're hoping that ramps back up, and as our customers feel safe flying and knowing that everything that we're doing to make them safe, we certainly hope that changes very soon.
Well, a little bit about apexanalytix. Before I do that, I'll just say thank you, Joni, and the folks at JetBlue for all of, you're really at the front lines of all of this, trying to keep everyone safe and getting us back to our traveling safely. So appreciate all of that. Just a little bit about apexanalytix. We have 250, really more than that, Fortune 500 and Global 2000 clients in essentially every sector. About 6.4 trillion in spend being protected by apexanalytix solutions, and about 3 billion in overpayments prevented or recovered annually. And a core of that is 32 million golden supplier records with contacts and trust scores, along with 650 integrated data sources to help us make sure that we know your suppliers and interact with them well. Just one of the elements is how bad foundations, bad controls can lead to bad outcomes. And here are three statistics that we've accumulated over the past few years. First is fraud can result with bad foundations and controls. $4.0 trillion are estimated in fraud from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Then CSI, which is a company that tracks OFAC and other government watch lists, say that about $650,000 is the fine that you can pay for your first violation related to OFAC. And then Apex, with our own work in recovery audit, have identified about 30% of all overpayments are somehow related to vendor master errors or exceptions.
Okay.
Next, yeah, go.
Sorry, I'll just go ahead. The next slide I think we're showing here probably looks a lot like me sitting in a car in the winter here. When I joined AP 10 years ago at JetBlue, I didn't have any visibility into our data that was in SAP. And it really did feel like trying to drive a car with the windshield covered in snow. Without that data, I didn't know if there were any issues related to duplicate invoices, duplicate vendors. And as Danny said, duplicate invoices and duplicate suppliers create a lot of the duplicate payments. So I needed to have some of that visibility. And, additionally, SAP does not really have any fraud controls. This is really kind of one of the biggest concerns I have every day is what's happening, who's getting in the system, and how do we prevent that? So on this next slide, we can see this is actually, emails that we received trying to get into our system. And really, it's not highly sophisticated here, but what happens is on that first one, they changed that Q in unique to a G. And with the hyperlink, it's really hard to tell that in an email. It looks very legitimate. They had all the right names. They sent it to all the right people. And then same with the next one, the Expedia group. Again, the G is replaced with a Q, also hard to really identify with that hyperlink line there. These are just two very easy examples. They're very simple and straightforward, but they do get into the system. And we know that other airlines were using the same, these folks use the same emails and were able to get in and infiltrate into their system and get some money. We did have one bank call us on this to say that, that amount looked very suspicious, and that's how we caught that one. Okay, Danny, going ahead there. Fraud, like I said, was a very huge factor when we were looking for a supplier portal. Every time you're constantly daily hit with these emails to update banking, to change an address. And then we are required to, of course, validate that in some way. With the portal, we're able to direct them there. So our suppliers go there now to make any updates where that's validated in the portal. There's a lot of checks in the portal that are done. One thing that people ask me a lot is, you check OFAC in the tin. Well, yes, we do check that initially, but how many people go back in and do an additional check on OFAC? And in 6 months, 9 months, are they on a prohibited vendor list that you never knew about? Where that fine could range, from $50,000 to $500,000 because that was not found.
Yeah, so essentially you were having a process before where suppliers were sending in emails to change their bank accounts, and now you're telling them, go to our portal, which is secure and controls all of that. Yeah.
Right. And, one thing that's nice in this portal now that we are using is there's a consortium of banks that are working together where they will now validate a bank account in real time. This is just a huge win for us because I don't know if a lot of you have tried to call a bank and validate a banking account, but they won't do it. And so you're really left open here without any way to know, is this the correct bank account that we're really sending the funds to? So in the portal, there is this new real-time check. If that bank account doesn't match, they're not able to continue on. And then we would have to get some further information from the vendor. And I'm assuming that a lot of times if it's fraud, they're not going to want to continue. They will call in and ask for kind of qualifying questions, what we will ask to prove who they are. We don't give out that information. So that is something they'll continue to call through your departments until they find somebody to give them that information. So you need to be careful there. But
yeah,
a great addition.
Yeah, and so the whole idea of the portal, the supplier maintains their profile in the portal, and not only are they putting in their banking information, but their tax IDs, their contacts, their contracts, if appropriate, all of their addresses, and all of that's being validated automatically. Their payment terms are being assigned automatically. They're being enrolled in automation solutions automatically, with real-time validation to external sources.
Right. And also, one thing on the next slide, Danny, this duplicate check within SAP, you can go in and check to see, can I match it against a TIN or a name, sometimes an address, but I can guarantee that you're going to miss a lot of those. With the portal, it will line up quite a few things. To say, hey, this is a duplicate vendor. They were operating under this name at this address using this tax ID, but we know that they're connected because they have that huge database that can line that up for us. Duplicate vendors is a huge problem with duplicate payments. A lot of suppliers will use both of their vendor numbers to enter invoices, and they may go to different approvers. So at that point, you're not knowing that these are even duplicates. And according to Apex, it's about 2 million per billion in spend that slips through those standard controls.
Yeah, our clients, just kind of across the board, for every $1 billion in spend, they catch about $2 million in duplicates that have gotten through SAP, because people learn how to get around the controls.
Right. And we do use another product with Apex, the First Strike platform, which is really, it's invaluable to me because it has prevented a lot of duplicates from going out the door. There's a lot of ways duplicates get in your system. It's not because you have bad controls or bad people. There are very easy ways to get in there. So you want to make sure that you have something that's truly catching these duplicates. Anytime they add a dash or a letter, a dot, SAP will see that as a separate invoice. And I'm saying SAP because that's the system we use. And I'm not sure in the other systems, but I do know in SAP, if you add any additional characters, numbers, letters, it does see it separately. That's where most of the errors happen. Sometimes the vendor will say, I don't remember getting paid, so I'm going to go enter this back into the system. It says it's been entered, but they still didn't get paid on it, so they add the .1 or .2 or ABC.
Yeah, and sometimes you would think three-way match controls would control for that, but lots of times the approver says, now, I thought I approved this invoice last week, approve, and then the payment goes out. Yeah.
Right. And the three-way match would if it was a PO. And then keep in mind, we're about 60% non-PO right now. So that makes you a little bit more vulnerable when you're not having everything on a PO that would match up in our e-invoicing system with that three-way match.
Yeah.
So as aside from the duplicates and First Strike, we use the recovery audit as well, because there's a lot of times where there's some hidden cash, unapplied funds that were never really reported, even on a statement. So even though you're getting statements from your suppliers, this unapplied cash, missed credits, rebates may not show up there. This has also been a very good recovery tool for JetBlue. It's something I would recommend for everybody to have some type of statement audit being done, because there's a lot of room for error in there.
Yeah, one of the things that Apex has is analytics and intelligence about which suppliers tend to suppress credits on their statements, or what conditions, what the transactions look like that suggest there might be a credit that's not being reported, so we can help go after those, and that really makes a difference. And some companies think of it, the recovery audit, as just a secondary external check on their own controls as well, to help identify gaps.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say about that recovery audit that we do with Apex, it's not only do they find this, but they collaborate with us and they let us know how they found it and how it got into our system and how we can prevent that in the future. So they work with us as a true business partner, and that really has been just an amazing partnership where we can kind of fill in these holes and figure out how it got in there and what do we need to change on our side to prevent that.
Yeah, and part of that too is collaborating with the supplier, because if you just call up a supplier and you're grumpy with them, they're not going to be very cooperative. So you got to have people who are, protecting that relationship with the client suppliers and really helping them collaborate around a reconciliation of payments and invoices, just to make sure everything is right in the end, which most AR departments really want. An overpayment messes up their lives as much as it does yours on the buying side. Yep. I thought I'd throw this slide up. We're just really proud of it at Apex Analytics. Spend Matters does a detailed RFI and demo of all the various systems that are involved in supplier relationship management and risk. And we've performed really, really well on their two axes. One is the y-axis is analyst score, the x-axis is customer score. And the idea, well, what's really, we attribute this to is the really close collaboration we've had with our clients in building the solution to make sure we had best-in-class validations, a workflow that's highly configurable to make sure that any changes to vendor records are approved and that risks are identified and continuously monitored and managed over time. We got a copy of this report. You can get it from our website if you'd like to see it at some point. So with that, I think we're ready for Q&A. So
okay. Thank you very much, Joni and Danny. I'm actually not seeing any questions from the audience in front of me right now, but I have a question for you for perhaps some closing thoughts. What's one word you would use to describe 2020 for you in your businesses?
You want to go, Joni?
I would say let's start over. Train wreck would be my one word there. And you know what, Danny, I did forget to mention one thing that I wanted to say with this whole train wreck is that within the portal, you have that option to do supply chain financing. And how nice would that have been to be able to turn that on and not have to jump through all these hoops that we have been jumping through to extend terms and negotiate through the payments right now. So remember that there's also the dynamic discount piece in there that you're able to turn off immediately instead of going through one by one, which is what we had to do. So the portal gives you a lot of functionality too. And that is something I wanted to mention because that is huge.
Yeah, I mean, different companies are being impacted in different ways. So I think there's a lot of variety to what companies are having to do. Some companies are just having to pay later. Some companies are getting a huge influx of cash right now, so they can pay their suppliers sooner. And I think the two things that have been really key that we've seen with our clients are one, they need a solution that's flexible, that can be configured and changed over time. You know, it's that whole concept of you build for change rather than build for last, because there are lots of companies that 6 months ago said, hey, I've never met a discount I didn't like, and never thought they would need to use third-party money to help pay suppliers on time. And now that has changed. Now they're looking for that third-party money. And then another one is, automation has really made a difference for the companies that have done the work to automate and standardize their processes. It's just been a much easier transition and crisis than for those who haven't. Just things like, how do I get a vendor set up, or how do I get invoices approved? How do I issue payments? It's a lot easier to issue and process an electronic payment or a virtual card payment or ACH than it is a check. And that's just one example of the thing. So the two key features we've seen are, be flexible and automate. Those are the two things you got to plan for to be able to address a crisis like this.
Yeah, you bet, Danny. That's a great way to wrap up. I really like what you said about build for change. And Joni, thank you so much for sharing JetBlue's story and what you're doing to work towards that flexibility and automation to set yourselves up to deal with times like this and come out of it stronger and better in the future. Our last customer presentation, somebody said, when we're most uncomfortable, that's when we grow the most. And I'm looking forward to hearing JetBlue's story at an ASUG event maybe in a year from now about how much you've grown thanks to this flexibility, thanks to this automation and all of the stuff that you guys have been doing with SAP and apexanalytix and all your other technologies. So that's it for our time. Thank you, Joni and Danny, and we're going to transition into our next customer story.